On the grand chessboard, at the dawn of history, when kingdoms rose and fell at the edge of a sword, when empires were built and erased in the blink of an eye, there was a man named Khalil ibn Hakim, the vizier of the forgotten kingdom of Iran, a land buried beneath the sands of time, though its wisdom still whispers through the mouths of sages. Khalil was no warrior. He never held a sword in his life, yet he ruled from behind the curtain, moving kings like pieces on a chessboard. He was neither the handsomest, nor of noble lineage, nor even the wealthiest, but he possessed one thing: a profound understanding of human nature and the ability to read people as one reads books. He used to tell his students, "People, my son, are not led by truth, but by beautiful illusions. Power does not lie in the throne, but in the one who makes the man on it believe he rules." In his final days, before being executed by the very king he had raised from boyhood, Khalil wrote his will on 7 sheets of parchment. It was no will of gold or land, but a different kind of legacy, a will of power. Within it, he distilled a lifetime of silent victories, political maneuvers, and defeats that he alchemized into wisdom. He did not write it in dry language, but as if each line were a hymn forged in fire. Each rule he wrote was a double-edged sword. Those who failed to wield it wisely lost their heads, but those who mastered it became rulers over those who thought them mere servants. This book is an attempt to revive those ancient pages, drawing from stories across history, from the prisons of emperors to the palaces of caliphs, from political conspiracies to the shadowy corners of commerce. We will dive into each rule, not as moral lessons, but as tools. Tools for survival, dominance, and excellence in a world ruled by the strong, and where the naive are enslaved. Remember as you read, these rules do not recognize right or wrong as taught in schools. Only results. In the kingdom of the grand game, no one asks how you won. Only, did you win? Let these pages be your map through a world of manipulation. Let them ignite within you the fire of wisdom, not to deceive, but to know when not to be deceived. Let us begin. On. Just a reminder, before we start the segment, these are 5 additional rules to the 20 we explained earlier, and 28 are left. Don't forget to like and subscribe so the video reaches the largest number of people. Enjoy watching. Rule 1. Pretend to be dumber than your opponent, the fool who fooled an emperor. In the 3rd century BC, China was fractured into warring kingdoms. Among them, the Kingdom of Han was known for its weakness compared to its mightier neighbors. In its court lived a man named Zhu Liang, a quiet figure with a soft voice and a perpetual smile, as if oblivious to the world around him. The emperor saw him as nothing more than a pleasant jester, cracking jokes to amuse the servants. Even the ministers mocked his slow speech and his constant act of misunderstanding. But one evening, the unexpected happened. News arrived that the Kingdom of Wei was preparing a massive invasion. The War Council convened, and every minister proposed an aggressive, reckless plan. Then came Zhu Liang's turn. He stood slowly and said in a hesitant voice, "Maybe if we pretend to surrender, they'll lower their guard." Laughter erupted. The emperor scoffed. "A fitting idea from someone who knows nothing of war." Still, he allowed Zhu Liang to try his plan, more as amusement than belief. Zhu Liang sent public letters of submission to Wei. He left food and water for their scouts at the border, opened village gates without resistance, and made every show of desperation. The generals of Wei fell for it. They believed Han had abandoned its pride to avoid conflict, so they entered, unguarded. One night was all it took, as the Wei army celebrated their easy conquest. Han's forces struck from the hills, having already cut their supply lines. The entire army was crushed, and the once weak kingdom reclaimed its place, thanks to the man everyone had dismissed as a fool. The next day, no one laughed. Even the emperor sat before Zhu Liang and said, "You were only as foolish as you chose to appear." Rule explained, "Feigning ignorance or stupidity is one of the most brilliant strategies in conflict. When others believe you are naive, they let down their guard. They drop their masks, speak freely, act boldly, and in doing so, reveal their weaknesses. Those who always flaunt intelligence keep everyone wary, always defensive. But the one who plays the fool slips unnoticed into the chambers of secrets." Modern-day example? During World War II, the British used this very principle in a masterstroke of deception, known as Operation Mincemeat. They planted a corpse with fake documents, making it appear to be a British officer carrying invasion plans for Greece. They left the body on a Spanish beach, knowing German agents would find it. The Germans believed the deception and diverted their forces to Greece, while the real invasion struck Italy. Britain pretended to have accidentally lost top-secret files, a perfect act of crafted stupidity. That one move changed the course of the war. The lesson: the real fool is the one who insists on appearing smart all the time. Cunning often requires a mask of cluelessness, not a shield of brilliance. When you pretend not to understand, your opponent speaks more, acts more confidently, and exposes more than they should. But beware, this weapon cuts both ways. Overuse it, and you may forget the act and become the fool for real. Rule 2. Turn your weakness into strength through smart tactics. The blind man who saw what others couldn't. In Abbasid-era Baghdad, a city ruled by wit, politics, and sharp tongues, lived a man named Al-Juwayfari ibn Hisham, blind since childhood. In a world that prized intellect, appearance, and agility, a blind man had no place among the movers and shakers. People smiled at him with pity as he passed by, whispering, if only he hadn't lost his sight. He could have been someone important, but as darkness fell over his eyes, light ignited in his mind. Juwayfari listened more than anyone. He could distinguish the tone of every minister's voice, detect lies through hesitations, and never got distracted by appearances. Smiles didn't fool him. He listened to what was behind the words. He entered politics, not through courts or armies, but through poetry. He composed verses and sent them to caliphs and ministers, praising them on the surface, but hiding coded warnings about betrayal and hidden intentions between the lines. With time, his insight earned him an audience among the elite. Though he held no official position, he was consulted on matters of state. He once told his student, "They thought me weak because I cannot see, but they didn't realize I hear far more than they ever will." And when the eyes are blind, the soul sees deeper through the veil. When a conspiracy was brewing to assassinate the vizier, it was Uaiferi who saved him. Not with a sword, but a single line of poetry. From the window of doubt, doom has arrived, and beneath your noses, the butcher has passed. The plot was uncovered, the traitors exposed, and the vizier named him his permanent advisor, the man who turned his blindness into unmatched political foresight. Rule explained, visible weakness is not always real weakness. In fact, it can be the most unexpected doorway to power. Everyone has a flaw, in body, in wealth, in origin, in reputation. But the clever individual redefines their flaw as an asset. Never complain about your obstacle. Ask yourself, how can I turn this obstacle into a weapon? How can I use others' pity, underestimation, or neglect to my advantage? If they don't see me as a threat, isn't that the perfect moment to strike? Modern-day example, Nelson Mandela. When he was imprisoned on Robben Island, his captors thought they had buried him politically. But he used his years behind bars not to weaken, but to transform. He read, he wrote, he even learned Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors, to speak directly to their minds and hearts. By the time he emerged, he was no longer just a revolutionary. He was a statesman. He would go on to become South Africa's president and unify both jailers and the jailed. His prison, once seen as his downfall, became his greatest symbol, a global icon of resilience and moral strength. The lesson: don't hide your weakness, leverage it. Whatever people label as your flaw might just be your opening to greatness, if you learn how to flip the narrative. In the world of power, it's not always the strongest who win, but the one who turns loss into leverage and shame into a signature. Rule 3. Focus all your power on one point instead of scattering it. Napoleon and the breach in the wall. In 1805, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the height of his military genius. He faced a powerful coalition of Austria and Russia, two massive empires whose armies outnumbered and outgunned his own. Most leaders in Europe believed the reckless little general was on the brink of defeat. But Napoleon saw the battlefield differently. He wasn't trying to control every piece on the board, only one. He believed in a simple principle. When you strike, don't knock with open palms. Strike with a focused fist. His strategy was to find a small weakness in the enemy's formation, smash it with overwhelming force, and send his entire army pouring through that breach, like a dam breaking from a single crack. At the Battle of Austerlitz, one of his greatest victories, Napoleon intentionally left his right flank exposed. It lured the Allies into advancing, convinced they had found a weak spot. While they celebrated their easy progress, Napoleon struck at the center of their army, the true point of weakness. The center collapsed, and with it, the entire army. In just a few hours, he crushed a force far larger than his own. When asked after the battle about his secret, he smiled and said, "I didn't need to be everywhere. I just needed to be in the right place, with everything I had." Rule explained. Many people spread themselves too thin. They want to be rich, famous, loved, and successful, all at once. They fire 1,000 arrows and hit no target at all. Real power doesn't come from expansion. It comes from concentration. When you channel your energy into one clear direction, one goal, one idea, one strike, you create an impact that can't be ignored. Like sunlight through a magnifying glass, focused enough to start a fire. Modern-day example. Look at Apple in the early 2000s. While tech companies were releasing dozens of gadgets and spreading themselves across markets, Steve Jobs made a bold move. Focus on one product, the iPhone. He canceled dozens of projects and bet the company's future on a single device that combined everything into one elegant experience. That focus made the iPhone a global phenomenon and transformed the digital world. If Apple had scattered its efforts like the competition, it would never have become the icon it is today. The lesson: don't fight 10 battles at once and expect to win. Pick your most important battle and pour everything into it as if it's your final stand. Focus is the strategy that turns even the weak into conquerors. In a distracted world, the focused one is a force of nature. Rule 4. Be the master of your role. Don't follow others blindly. Ibn Khaldun, the man who imitated no one. In the 14th century, a time of collapsing empires, deadly plagues, and political chaos across the Islamic world, a child was born in Tunis. His name, Abdurrahman ibn Khaldun. He could have easily followed the path expected of him, become a judge, a preacher, or a scholar reciting inherited opinions. But something in him refused to be a copy. He studied Islamic law, hadith, logic, the standard curriculum, yet he began to ask dangerous questions. Why do civilizations rise? And why do they fall? Is history just a story, or are there laws that govern it? He wrote his legendary book, the Muqaddimah, blending history, sociology, economics, and political science, in a time when people thought such thinking was unnecessary or even outrageous. Some mocked him, saying, "What business does a scholar have speaking about the laws of civilization?" But he didn't care. He didn't imitate. He didn't seek approval. He carved his own path. And he left us with this eternal quote: "He who imitates is lost. He who follows without guidance wanders the roads, even if he thinks he's moving forward." Now, 6 centuries later, his name echoes in academia around the world, while the names of his critics have turned to dust. Rule explained, those who follow others blindly never create anything new. They walk in the shadows of others, thinking they're leading when they're only trailing behind. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but if you spend your life copying others, even with effort, you'll always be a faded reflection of someone else. True success begins when you ask yourself, what do I see? What do I bring to the table? What makes me different? Modern-day example, Elon Musk, the eccentric entrepreneur, is a prime example of nonconformity. When people laughed at electric cars, he built Tesla. When they mocked the dream of reaching Mars, he launched SpaceX. He didn't follow existing models. He broke them. He's not the most polite, not the most technically brilliant, but he believed in his vision with such force that the world eventually caught up. The lesson: don't copy others, not even the successful ones. Know your place, own it, Everyone in a herd moves together, but the lion walks alone. If you don't chart your own course, you'll spend your life clapping for others as they pass you by. Be the master of your mission, not a follower lost in someone else's. Rule 5. Reinvent yourself relentlessly. Saladin, the man who died twice to be born a third time. Before becoming a leader whose name shook the walls of Europe, Saladin was just a young officer in Nur ad-Din Zangi's army. He was born into Crete and raised in Damascus, showing none of the traits of a historic hero. He was quiet, fond of poetry and philosophy, and had no known passion for war. When the Fatimid state in Egypt collapsed and Nur ad-Din appointed him as governor, people mocked the choice. Will this calm young man really rule Egypt? But Saladin wasn't what he appeared to be. Upon arriving in Cairo, he completely reinvented himself. He transformed from a follower to a leader, from a polite scholar to a statesman, from a man in the shadows to a blazing sun. And when Nur ad-Din died, Saladin wasn't buried with him. He was reborn, taking the heart of the Islamic East into his own hands to lead a war that would become legend. The liberation of Jerusalem. When he encountered the Crusaders, he shifted his strategy. He became as skilled in diplomacy as he was with the sword. He negotiated as well as he fought, forgave as well as he avenged. He never stayed in the same version of himself. Each time he faced a new reality, he shed his old skin and wore a new one. Explanation of the rule. People love stability, but the world knows no stability. Those who resist change are buried alive in the sands of time. Reinventing yourself doesn't mean abandoning your identity. It means refreshing your tools, changing your methods, and opening new windows in your mind every time others close. True success isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself again and again, like a masterpiece, carved, polished, and refined. A modern example, Muhammad Ali, the boxing legend, lost mid-career, and critics said, "He's done. He's not what he used to be." But he didn't try to become the old Ali. He invented a new version, slower, smarter, fighting with his mind before his fists. In his famous fight with George Foreman, he used an unexpected strategy, letting his opponent hit him for rounds until Foreman was exhausted, then ended the match with a single blow. He called it rope-a-dope, a mental innovation that changed boxing history. The lesson: if you stay the same, life will pass you by. Reshape yourself when the world around you changes. Don't fear change. Make it your ally. Because those who don't reinvent themselves become outdated in a world that shows no mercy to the old. Power, like the wind, is invisible yet deeply felt. It whispers through actions, hides in silences, and roars in bold decisions. The stories of history's greatest minds, kings, artists, visionaries, each teach us that power is not a single act, but a collection of habits, choices, and principles lived each day. And now the ink dries on this page, but the real writing begins in your own life. Which rule will you carry into your next battle? What story will the world one day tell about how you moved, led, created, or disappeared? The final rule is yours to write.